Hi everyone, my name is Jenny and welcome back to my channel. I will preface this by saying I do have the cold/flu, so if I seem a little bit low energy, that is why. But I wanted to sit down and film this with the energy that I had today because this is one of my favorite videos to watch and also one that I've been very excited about making, and it is my top 10 books of 2025. If I don't make too much sense summarizing these books, I do apologize, but we're gonna just go with the energy that we've got today. And hopefully these are books that you end up picking up. But it took a while for me to make this list because I was jumping in the ranking of these books, but I think this is how I feel comfortably about my ranking. I think it's books 10 through 6 are the ones that kind of shuffle around for me. 1 through 5 are definitely the solid rankings for those ones. But enough yapping about that, let's reveal the top 10 of 2025. So book number 10 is going to be Unsteady by Peyton Corinne. This is a college hockey romance where we follow our main character Reese and Sadie. Reese is the captain of the hockey team and Sadie is an ice skater. Unfortunately, Reese is dealing with PTSD from an injury he encountered last season that was quite violent and ended up him having a concussion. And because he's the team captain, he's been kind of hiding the fact that he's been struggling with being on the ice. And then our main character, Sadie, is an ice skater, and she has been hiding the fact that she's struggling with being in a lot of debt and having to go through these court hearings in order to get custody of her younger brother and be his sole provider and caretaker. And so we are dealing with these two athletes in college who are dealing with things that are completely overwhelming, obviously, but also things that they feel that they can't lean on other people to provide assistance with. And so this is definitely a kind of romance book that deals with a lot of mental health issues. And I think Peyton Corinne handled those topics so well. And then getting to see these two characters who are kind of closed off form this kind of friendship, and that friendship slowly blooming into a love that is very supportive and very real. I really enjoyed this one. This was so heartfelt, and I also really liked the main character, Sadie. She comes off as very prickly and albeit a little bitchy. I know certain people who've read this that were like, oh, she was just so prickly that it wasn't fully enjoyable. But I think for me, thinking back about how I was in college, it felt very relatable to me to see such a prickly main character and somebody who had their walls up. And it wasn't that she was just a bitch for bitch's sake. It was like she was just on defense all the time because she was dealing with so much heartache and so much resistance in her life and so many difficult things that it just made sense for her character. And the romance itself was just so sweet and so swoony. And I think because of the very difficult topics that these two main characters deal with, the fact that they can come together and find so much mutual support but also no judgment in regards to the situations that they're going through, I really enjoyed this one, and it was such a pleasant surprise. And I'm very, very excited to read Peyton Corinne's newest release that's coming out, I think, in the spring of this year. And then book number 9 on my list is also going to be another romance, and that is Between Friends and Lovers by Shirlene Uobi. I'm going to hold my e-reader in such a way that I'm not blinding you with the light reflection. But this one follows our main character, Dr. Josephine. She is, of course, a doctor, given the title, but she also kind of does a little bit of online influencing where she talks about wellness and well-being, and she shares tips and tricks online. And she also is best friends with, I believe he's an actor. They've been friends for a very long time, for over a decade. But the thing is that she has been pining over this friend for a while. And so she's been like, oh my gosh, like, is this something that I should kind of act on now that I'm like in my early 30s or turning 30? Or is this something that I should just let pass by? And so the triggering event is that they go to this event that her best friend's mother is hosting. I think it's like a sort of charity event. And that man brings this woman who bullied Josephine when she was like in college. So she's like, okay, maybe I should get over this man. And so she ends up running into this sort of author that she's seen online named Malcolm. And we get to see Josephine sort of struggle between, do I fall into a relationship that feels safe because I've known this man for so many years? Or do I take the risk and the leap to jump into this new relationship and potentially find real love with this man named Malcolm? And then also there's like these layers of her trying to figure out what she wants out of her own life and career-wise, as she's feeling quite overwhelmed with her like whole doctor thing, but then she feels very underwhelmed with her whole social media influencing thing. And so it's such a, I think, beautiful discovery of oneself that is written in this book. And I also think the romance unfolds in such a beautiful way. And our main character, Malcolm, he has just like perfect book boyfriend vibe and energy. And I think there was one caretaking scene towards the latter half of this book that I think was just so well done. And the mental health representation and everything that was in here was so beautiful, chef's kiss. And sometimes I think back about that caretaking like scene and moment. I'm just like, how beautiful is it to be seen in that way? And for Shirlene to write that scene and to have like so much gentleness and tenderness in that scene was just so beautiful. And it's not like just that moment that Shirlene writes very tenderly. I think overall the development of the relationship in this was just so well done, and it blossoms in such a way that it's like these characters feel so real and the love here feels so real, and I really enjoyed this one. Veering off into a completely different topic, vibe, and energy. Book number 8 on my list is Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang by Kylie Lee Baker. This is a horror, and it's an intense one. So we follow our main character, Cora, who is a crime scene cleanup person, and she unfortunately has to witness the murder of her sister, and it is very visceral and very violent and very on page. It happens in the first chapter, and it was probably one of the most intense openings that I'd ever read. And the body gore, the description was intense. And I will preface this by also saying that it is a COVID book, and it really goes into the discussion of the racial targeting that East Asian people had experienced within COVID. Although I'm not East Asian myself, I'm Southeast Asian, being Vietnamese. I could really relate to the microaggressions and macroaggressions that were happening around the time of the pandemic and also during lockdown. And seeing that representation here be so magnified in horror was something that felt, I think cathartic would be the right word, because it wasn't a pleasant read at all. But Cora has to deal with a lot of not only the grief of losing community through obviously the lockdown that she has to experience in New York City, but also the grief of losing her sister and like having to had witnessed something so violent. And what's really interesting about this is there's also an element of mystery, because at the crime scenes that Cora is cleaning up, her and her coworkers are finding bat carcasses in these people's like apartment buildings, and she's starting to connect the dots that there's something going on, and specifically East Asian people and specifically women are being targeted. And so she thinks that there is a serial killer out on the loose in New York. And so we have to uncover that as well and have to like experience the horrific moments in this book. But it just felt so tender and so touching in the way that we're discussing grief, and grief on so many different levels. I think Kylie Lee Baker writes so beautifully. This is my first time ever reading from Kylie, but wow, the writing was stunning. The sentences were evocative. The gore was intense. Like, it was such a beautiful book despite how intense and how gory this book was. I think the messaging behind it all at the end was just so beautifully done, and this was such an amazing horror, and I can't wait to read. I think Japanese Gothic is Kylie Lee Baker's next book, but I'm sure that one's going to be just as crazy as this one. But yeah, Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang, what a beautifully written book. And then book number 7, I unfortunately don't have a copy of this one physically, but it is Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. This is a YA horror, and it follows our main character, Andrew, who goes to like this very exclusive preparatory school, and they're like in high school. It's not like young. But he is going back for his senior year after something very tumultuous happens the year before. And he is going there with his twin sister, Dove, and his best friend, Thomas, who is like his best friend, but also he's like very intensely yearning for, and he's like very obviously in love with this Thomas guy, but like he's, you know, trying to figure out his sexual identity, and then he's also trying to figure out like, am I really just friends with him, or is this guy like in love with my sister, and all that with the backdrop of horror going on, where his friend Thomas is drawing these pictures inspired by his very dark, fantastical stories that he's writing. And unfortunately, for some reason unknown, the drawings that his best friend Thomas are making become real, and they come out at night, and they're terrorizing like the school and everything. This book, horror-wise, the body gore blew my mind. I was like, C.G. Drews? I didn't even know we could get that intense with YA. I don't know. I don't know how genre works and how they rank age-wise, but the body gore in this was shocking, very shocking. It doesn't really happen until like maybe midway into the book, but when that scene comes up, I was like, and also what I really, really enjoyed about this book was the exploration of sexuality. Our main character, Andrew, is actually asexual, and I think the representation there was done so well. And having Andrew really on page talk about wondering, am I like weird for not having these desires for people, but then I really am like really into my friend Thomas, but like, am I really into him the way that other people are talking about being into other people? And having that discussion on page, I think was really well done, and I think it's very needed for the YA audience. I really enjoyed this one, really enjoyed the gothic atmosphere. Highly, highly recommend. And the next book, which is a little bit lighter, maybe not by much, but it's Kill the Beast by Sarah Swift. This book, oh my gosh, it just was like a warm hug. It wrapped me up in its cozy little arms and gave me a squeeze, and I just really needed this book at the time that I read it. This one was pitched as a Witcher Howl's Moving Castle kind of vibe, and we follow our main character Liza, who is a beast hunter. So she basically hunts down these beasts that are created by fairy to like go out and terrorize people, right? And the reason why she becomes a beast hunter is because 13 years prior, her older brother was actually killed by a beast, and hence the title, Kill the Beast. She's trying to kill this monster here. That's the one who took her brother 13 years ago and kind of left her basically like an orphan with no family or anything. So her whole shtick is that she is trying to find vengeance for her brother's death. And this very rich patron, Alderic, somehow has information on the beast, and Liza's like, I'll see what this is about, because she's been looking for more information regarding the beast for so many years, and she's gonna catch any little detail that she can. And so in this book, we follow Liza and Alderic as they are trying to go on a journey and gather certain little items in order to create a magical weapon in order to kill the beast. This book does deal a lot with grief, and there were moments where it felt very heavy and very vivid in regards to Liza's grief, but also the grief that our other main character, Alderic, is going through as we slowly unfold his character. And also, it deals a lot with anger because our main character, Liza, is on this vengeance mission. There's a lot of anger that she's held in regards to the loss of her brother. And I think the discussion on anger not necessarily being a negative thing, but how we use our anger to act out in the world, I think was such a beautiful discussion in here. And the reason why it felt more cozy, let's get into the cozy section of it all, was that there was a lot of discovery within found family and finding support in other people who are able to see us as our true self behind all of our grief and behind all of our anger. There are people who can still see the humanity in us. And I think their journey together, becoming friends and becoming confidants in each other, was such a beautiful story to witness. I will give a trigger warning for suicidal ideation and discussion in this book. None of it is necessarily on page, but it is discussed and sometimes in detail. I do think that those topics were really well done, and getting to see the support that these two characters have of each other on this vengeance mission, and just discovering, like, what does it mean to be grieving somebody that they love, and like, what will this vengeance end up doing for them? It's not going to bring back the ones that they love, who are dead, but what will vengeance mean at the end of this entire mission? And I think it was just so amazingly done. Found family in here, surprisingly, despite there being so much of a darker topic in this one, given the vengeance and the anger and the grief, I think there were so many funny moments in this one. I remember there was like a discussion between Alderic and Liza, and it genuinely made me laugh out loud. I love their banter, I love their dynamic, their friendship, and everything that was going on in here. Stunning, beautiful, amazing. Now let's move into our top 5 here. Book number 5. Honestly, I struggled a lot with this book in regards to rating because I think the author did such an amazing job with creating one of the most viscerally real and frustrating characters that I'd ever read this year, and that is Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Wang. Siona in this book pissed me off so much. She was about to get the buy one get one free special of My Fists. That was how much this woman pissed me off, and like, she felt so real to me. Anyway, let's talk about what this book is about before I go off about Siona. In this book, Siona is studying magic at the magical university in their city, and she ends up making history being the first woman to ever make high mage. She graduates out, and then she ends up taking this test that certifies her, and she is now being inducted as a high mage, and she has to do like this big project that's supposed to help out the city. And because she's a high mage now, she obviously is supposed to be given like other lower mages in order to do her research and, you know, build out something or whatever she's planning to do with her project. But her male colleagues obviously don't like the fact that she's a woman and the only woman in their department. So in order to screw her over, they're like, wouldn't it be funny if we gave her the janitor of our building as her assistant? And she's like, what the hell? Like, this guy doesn't know anything about magic. I've spent all my life studying magic, and you're gonna try to screw me over by giving me a janitor. And so we are following her as she is working through, you know, the misogyny of this world. And also, an even deeper layer in this book is her figuring out that maybe she too is a misogynist, and she too is an oppressor and racist and all these other terrible things, right? Because her janitor, Tommel, is an immigrant. He used to be a nomadic hunter, and due to some unfortunate events, he ends up immigrating into the city that Siona lives in because it's like one of the safer places, and he is going there with his niece. But they are treated very, very lowly, and they're given barely any respect. And so Siona has to obviously work with Tamil in order to do her project, and with working with somebody of a completely different like ethnic background to her, and somebody who society has taught her has been completely less than her entire life, she has to confront a lot of these very backward opinions that she's had of other people. As I said, she is kind of being confronted with her own internal misogyny. She is confronted with the racism that she has learned through the society. And while she's not technically responsible for what society had taught her, she is responsible on educating herself and seeing the wrongs that she has like instilled in her mind. If you're a character reader, I highly recommend that you read this one. And also thematics and everything in here as well. Very great discussions to have. The fourth book I have is a double special because it is a book with two books in it, and I didn't want to separate it and be like, this is 4 and 5. I'm just going to put it together as number 4, and that is The Killer on the Road and The Babysitter Lives by Stephen Graham Jones. This book, I think, as a lot of Stephen Graham Jones books, really, really, really grew on me. I don't know between the two which one is my favorite because, again, they really grew on me in a way that I did not expect. But Killer on the Road, we're following our main character where she's going on this road trip to kind of escape her life, and her friends go on this road trip with her, pretending that they're going to help her escape, but they end up like trying to give her an intervention. But unfortunately, as the intervention is happening on their road trip, they encounter a serial killer, and it's pretty intense in this one. And then in The Babysitter Lives, we're following our other main character who is babysitting this rich family's twins so that the couple can go out on like their first date after so long. And unfortunately, she realizes that her and the twins are not alone in this house. This set of stories by Stephen Graham Jones is probably the most gory and intense book that I've ever read from Stephen Graham Jones. And I think that's like, it was very shocking as somebody who is like really, really getting into his work. Killer on the Road was the first one that I read. The opening in that one was crazy. Killer on the Road was so intense, but I think the reason why I really enjoyed this is that we're following these two young teenage girls really working through some difficult things, and that is embodied via horror. So in Killer on the Road, we're following our main character who is working through grief, and I really saw that the serial killer was embodying that grief, and it was so vivid and so visceral how he was terrorizing her down this road of her life, and she's trying to shake free of the grief that she feels. And when she thinks she's about to get over it, he pops up and he's like, surprise, I'm killing somebody else in your life. And she's like, what is this about? Like, can you just give me a break? And I think that embodiment of grief was so well done in this one. And I initially was like, I'm not sure about it. I give it like a 4. But then after it like really grew in my mind and became something that I thought back about, I really enjoyed it as a kind of grief horror. And it was so visceral, probably one of the most high action Stephen Graham Jones books. I know a lot of people who don't really enjoy his books tend to say like it's a very slow paced horror. I think this book specifically is probably one of his most high action books that I've read from him. And then Babysitter Lives, I really enjoyed the exploration of a sort of haunted house in this one, and it gave me just such visceral, creepy vibes in this one. The entity in the house, oh, it was so uncomfortable. There were so many moments where I felt so viscerally moved in an uncomfortable way. And I just thought that it was so, so well done. Really enjoy this one and highly recommend that you read it during like spooky season, because the vibes in this like little bind up, intense, crazy, one of my favorite things that I'd read during the fall time. Book number 3 was a book that was not on my radar. I did not hear about it from anywhere except one of my friends had shared like a book article and was like, oh, this sounds really interesting and intriguing. And we all ended up picking it up. And that is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. This is such a dynamic fantasy, and a fantasy that I really think was amazing and really deserves all the flowers that it's been getting this year. In The Raven Scholar, we are following our main character, Nima, who is in charge of investigating a murder of one of the people who are in this competition to become the next emperor. In this kingdom, they basically, after I think it's 20 years, the emperor has to step down, and then everybody in the clans picks one representative who will go into these trials and end up kind of competing in a way that showcases their strengths, and whoever wins these trials is the one that ends up being the emperor. So they do this in such a way to keep it fair. So obviously they need a very well-rounded and dynamic leader, and so they kind of have competitions and trials where it's testing their wit, their charisma, their physicality, all those things. Unfortunately, Nima is the Raven Scholar, and she is not somebody that is well versed in every one of those things. But the Raven representative that they choose ends up being murdered. And so the emperor is like, well, you're the smartest one out of like all of our leaders, so you need to get in there. You need to be part of this competition, and you need to tell me which one of those people murdered the Raven like representative. And so she is going in there, and it's like a murder mystery. It's a trial competition. There is twists and turns. There are plot reveals that just had my jaw on the floor. There is this other side plot of a second chance romance that I wasn't even looking at, but like when it was presented to me, I was like, I could really eat this up. This is very intriguing. I think Antonia in this book weaved in so many fun things with obviously a competition, obviously a murder mystery, this fantasy world. All of these things were weaved so well into one another that it was just a flawless, seamless book. Stunning work done here. Book number 2 is a sequel of a fantasy series that I started last year, and the first book I really quite enjoyed, but this one really knocked my socks off, and it is A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is book number 2, and this book we follow Anne and Din. I believe it's 5 years after the Tainted Cup, and they are tasked by the Empire to go investigate this missing persons case. A treasurer from like the outskirts of the Empire just up and disappeared, and the place that he was in, all the windows are locked and all the doors are locked, and all the other doors on the outside of the building are guarded. So they're unaware of how he potentially went missing. And it is a classic locked room mystery. But as Anna and Din start uncovering pieces of this mystery, they are starting to unravel these very interesting and intriguing mysteries that go further into the kind of leadership of the Empire. And I think this book was just such a beautiful blend of fantasy and mystery, and also getting to see our main characters, Anna and Din, and we discover so much more about them personally. I really enjoyed the obviously unveiling of certain elements of their personalities, but also getting to see Din as, you know, in book number 1, he was very green. That was like one of his first few jobs that he was doing with Anna, but in this one, he has a lot of experience with helping her solve mysteries, and he has this sort of reluctance for his job because he's not sure how he, in this department and being an investigator is doing anything positive for the people of the Empire. And we get to see him as he really struggles with wondering, like, is this a job that I really want to keep? Is this something that I feel that is positively impacting my community? And he also questions, what is his job doing for the kingdom? In his service to the king, what is that really doing? Is he keeping these unknown figures in power for a positive reason or for a negative reason? And I think the discussions of that in this story were just so well done. I think Din is such an intriguing character. He's like this little bimbo, but he actually is just so intriguing, and he's a lot more intelligent than I think he gives himself credit for. But I think when you are working alongside somebody like Anna, who is like the top of her department, you would feel dumb being around somebody that is so seasoned and so well educated like Anna, and getting to see the reveals of her character as well, and like slowly peeling back like the threads of her personality and getting to know more about her was just so intriguing. And I think this was a book where I could tell Robert Jackson Bennett was having so much fun getting to write these characters, getting to build upon these characters, and clearly caring a lot about the characters in this. I love when I read a book and an author clearly is enjoying writing in that world, and A Drop of Corruption is one of those cases where you can really tell the author has so much care about the characters and the world that is being built here, and also the messages that are being presented to you in this book. There's a lot of discussion on, authority and what we as the kind of lower people in the system are doing in order to uplift authority or question authority. And I think, yeah, it was just so well done and very clarified within the author's author note at the very end of this book. I think if you are reading this one, do read the author note in this one. Robert Jackson Bennett very clearly has a message and a theme that he wants to bring to the forefront of this book, and I think it was really, really well done. And I don't know, I can't wait for book 3, but I think I'm going to just reread book 1 and 2 and just, giggle alongside Anna and Din because I love their character dynamic so, so much. And finally, we are talking about book number 1 of 2025. And this book, I think, came at a great time. I was feeling a little bit like not in the reading mood. And then I picked up this book, and this book just enthralled me, really racked my mind, and all I could think about was this book. I read it for Summerween, I think, and I was just so surprised that I ended up loving this book as much as I did. And even when I wasn't reading the book, I was thinking about reading the book. That was how enthralled I was with the story. And book number 1 of 2025 is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Oh, this book is stunning, amazing, brilliant. 5 stars, 10 stars, a million stars, infinity stars. I just think about this book all the time, really. This book has really enthralled me and has really made me a fan of Stephen Graham Jones as I'm working through his backlist now and currently. This book follows 4 childhood friends who are Native American, and they are kind of running away from something that they did 10 years prior. And this entity is sort of stalking them throughout this book, and this entity is trying to seek vengeance on whatever terrible thing that they did 10 years prior. And so this book has a bit of a layer of mystery, as in the beginning, you're wondering why these 4 men feel so haunted. And we slowly get this reveal of what they did 10 years prior, and getting to see the horrific events of what they did and the lack of accountability that they take in regards to this. This book has so much rich culture entwined with the feelings of regret. I think Stephen Graham Jones really entwines this very deep set of importance of culture and tradition, and mixing in the regret these men have in their lives and their life choices, and how that regret can slowly trickle down to the younger generation that they are raising. And oh my gosh, the vengeance in this one, the vengeance story in this was so intense, so vivid, so enamoring. I do love a revenge story, and so seeing this come to life and seeing this entity kind of stalk them and haunt them throughout the story, like there were moments where they're not even thinking of the entity, but you're reading it and you're thinking like, I feel as an audience member that I am being watched as I read this. This thing is obviously hell-bent on revenge, and it feels so real and so visceral. And I think Stephen Graham Jones brings in so much great culture and emotion, and the idea of like, you can't run away from things and not take accountability, because one day it will come to you and it will be something way more intense than you could ever imagine it. And it is so important to just face the things that we have done and accept the things that we have done and take accountability for those things, or be haunted by it for so long. And this book, I don't even think I can put into words about how brilliant that I think it is. I think I'm due for a reread so that I can annotate this, but Stephen Graham Jones did his big one with this one. I like, of course, I understand why this book is so hyped up, because I loved it. It was so amazing. Stephen Graham Jones, you have the honor of not being just my number one book of 2025, but getting 2 books in my top 10. So congratulations to you, Stephen. He's never gonna watch this video, but you're watching the video, so now you know that he has the amazing honor of being number 1 and what is it, number 4. Number 1 and number 4. Stunning job, Stephen. Love it. Still working through your backlist. I will probably see you in my top 10 of 2026, to be honest, but amazing book, and it still enthralls my mind to this day that I think about it. So beautiful, amazing. That is my top 10 of 2025. I do think that the year of 2025 was a little bit rocky in regards to my reading. I don't think I was reading as consistently as I wanted to, but I think that we discovered some really great gems and finding new favorite authors. Very amazing. I think being able to gush about my top 10 has really brought a lot of energy back into my soul. So that is a positive thing for this video. I hope you enjoyed this one. I do want to know, what was your number 1 book of 2025? If you want to just give me a list of top 10, I would love to read that as well. But if you don't want to write all of that, you can just tell me your number 1 book of the year. I would really be interested in knowing that. And as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!